Hey guys, it's Eric from Eric F. Drums. Thanks for joining our new Basement Conversation series. Again, on this show, we will be interviewing fellow drummers like ourselves, other drummers who have YouTube channels, folks around the drumming industry, and really just try to uncover what makes them tick, what got them into music, what set them off on their path, to becoming a better drummer, and really just trying to understand a little bit better why people do what we do, and hopefully try to learn from them in the process. So with that said, let's jump into it and let's see who today's guest is.
Hey guys, it's Eric with Eric F. Drums. Welcome back to episode 2 of the Basement Conversation series. I didn't even think we'd make it to episode 2, so here we are. Last week went really great. Lots of people on the live chat, tons of comments. People were really into what we were doing, and some people said, hey, we want to see a professional musician as well. Could you make that happen? And instead of going down to the local pub down the road and finding the Tuesday night performer, which no one right now is performing anyway, we actually got a real rock star. And with us is Mr. Andy Selway. Andy, I gotta soak you in, man. Hang on a second. Again, you're the first bona fide rock star on the show here. This is a big deal.
Thank you for having me. I don't know if I agree with the rock star bit, but yeah, go on. I'll take it.
Good. The production here is like a Wayne's World, basement production. So to get a guy who's a legit touring and recording musician in a band that I've actually listened to for a long time, and that lots of people have, it's a pretty big deal for episode 2. Maybe we'll get an episode 3 out of this. Who knows? That
would be good.
Where are you at tonight?
I'm in Florida in my little bedroom studio kind of setup. It's
nice.
Also a Wayne's World kind of recording situation here.
I don't know, man. Yours is a little bit more, well decked out. I mean, you have like legit equipment. I've got my E-kit, my kid's Ludwig Breakbeats kit, my makeshift table for my laptop, which is one of the floor toms. I have a feeling yours is a little bit better of a setup.
Well, I think you just got a good angle that you see in here, but it's not that much different. But yeah, it's we're going to get a proper acoustic panel treatment up in here soon as well, so I can sort of get some better sounds. But yeah, it does.
Awesome. Well, hey man, I am unbelievably happy and really lucky to have you on. I know that you guys were supposed to be out on a tour with your band KMFDM and Ministry this year. 2020 hit, everything fell to pieces. And now you're in my basement on a Zoom call, which if not for COVID, I have a feeling that maybe this wouldn't have happened, but we certainly appreciate you being here. I know the tour too it seemed wickedly popular, because I remember when tickets went on sale, maybe early this year, like cities were selling out quick, at least here in the States. I mean, I know Chicago was gone before I even had a chance to look. So it sounded like it was gearing up to be a great tour.
Yeah, I think at least a third of it, maybe half of it, was kind of sold out already. And as if it had still been happening, I'm sure more shows would have sold out as well. But it's a tour that KMFDM first did when Ministry had KMFDM out like 30 years ago.
Wow.
And that's what kind of kicked it off for KMFDM partly in the States. So this would kind of be a recreation of that.
I can't remember. Was there another band? Was Front 242 on it too, or am I making that up?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe so.
Yeah, because for some reason I thought they had something to do with it. Maybe I'm thinking of an old tour from you guys, but like when I think of sort of like iconic, like industrial hard rock bands, like those are three of the maybe 5 bands that would come up in my mind. I mean, maybe the others being like Nine Inch Nails and like It's Red, maybe. I don't know. Like there's a small core group of like those bands that have just endured right through the last 20, 30 years. So
yeah.
Hopefully 2021, see things get normal. Hopefully, I don't know. Maybe we'll be able to see you guys in the city near us soon.
It's all rescheduled to start on April the 1st in Seattle, which is where we would have kicked off had it happened this time as well. But yeah, I mean, fingers crossed. Everything that's rescheduled will stay rescheduled. So,
fingers crossed. If that's all it takes, that's great. Let's hope. Well, let's talk about this for a second then, because it's pretty timely. It's a pretty timely issue. I'd love to sort of get your perspective, because it's probably different than me being a basement interview guy / drummer. What's your perspective on sort of how the business, the music business, touring and recording folks are going to have to, pivot or shift in order to stay like an active, viable business concern throughout the year? Because like things stopped, right? So like, how are you guys going to have to do things differently?
I don't think anybody's quite sure how they're going to proceed or what's going to happen yet. Any band, I mean, from us down to bands that are smaller than us and bands that are much bigger. There's no path and everybody's in limbo. Not to mention, nearly everybody I know works at venues or works as crew guys or, bus companies, or they're musicians, or they work or they're recording. And none of them have anything at the moment. And there really is no end in sight at the moment. Obviously, there's a big problem with a lot of the venues are closing down and sort of going out of business now, as are bus companies and, everything. So I really don't know. I mean, I've seen bands have been doing like drive-in concerts.
To say the ripple effect, like you think of the musicians, everyone knows that the musicians are getting screwed right now. Like everyone knows it. And it's, but the ripple effect beyond that, like there are so many people downstream, right? It could be the people who bring food to the venue, the catering, the transportation people, like logistics people, the guys who put the lights and the trusses up and all. It's like there are so many people. That is their job.
Yeah, I mean, particularly like for bigger bands. I mean, I was just reading a post from a friend on Facebook earlier. Someone in the biz, a crew guy, that he just did a sort of brief layout of all of the staff and what they did at the last show that he worked at, and that came to 350 people. Wow. That's just for one gig in one town, one night. So they're all out of work, and I don't know what a lot of those got. Well, I've got friends in England and stuff. I mean, they're just kind of sitting and waiting, but I don't know what a lot of those guys are doing. They've had to go out and find other work, get regular jobs, which most of them haven't got that much experience at, because the guys I know, they've been kind of road dogs for years. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, everybody's trying to find their feet. I mean, there's bands trying to do kind of online shows and things like that. I mean,
I see people doing like drive-in shows. I see people doing online ticket sales to shows, which I'd happily support that. Look, we all know that the bands that we love and know and love and listen to, we want to support them, and if they do that sort of online stuff, I think it's fair. I think it's a great way, for them to generate some revenue, to still be playing in front of audiences. I see a lot of guys also doing online lessons. I guess you're kind of lucky though too, because I think, don't you also do maybe drum recording and drum tracks for other artists? Like you have like a cool setup there in your home studio. Maybe that's another thing that a lot of folks are doing, is just doing like kind of like session work for other artists. I don't know.
Yeah, and I've always done bits and pieces of that anyway over the years, and that's something that even before this COVID thing kicked in, I was trying to build up and look at doing more of. As at KMFDM, I mean, we're all getting on. We don't tour quite as often as we used to, and obviously at the moment we're not touring at all. Yeah. But I was trying to find something I can sort of do more from home to sort of generate some income anyway. And I'm a drummer. I've got to make these work for me, and bring some cash in from here.
For sure.
And yeah, that's something I'm very much trying to build up now. And a lot of other guys seem to be doing that now. There's a hell of a lot of remote musicians now, and there's a lot of websites that have sprung up. Yeah. Where you can advertise your services, and you've got guys of all kind of capabilities.
Well, this may be the new normal. I mean, at least for the foreseeable, short-term future, maybe into 2021. So, I certainly wish all the artists, and not only the artists, but again, all the crew, and like those are families. Like you mentioned, 350 people in the local crew, it's 350 families, right? And I think people forget about that. So it's been a tough year, and I got to tell you, I think the next kick in the nuts came from when I was reading an article, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, in the height of all the COVID stuff that's going on, right? And it was about Live Nation, who everyone knows controls pretty much almost every venue.
Yeah.
I mean, really, in almost every concert that happens in probably every market. And they had these announcements that were just hard for me to even understand, right? Artists are out of work right now. And then Live Nation comes out with things like new stipulations around touring acts. Like, for instance, I think artists now or not now, but when they start touring again, are going to be forced to take like a 20% haircut across the board. I read things like force majeure around festivals. So like if for instance you guys book a festival, and you don't book other things for that week or that weekend because you're supposed to be at the festival, and if the festival cancels or some act of God or nature or whatever, that that those bands won't get paid. I've also heard that they changed the guarantee structures so that if a promoter cancels a show, again, like I think the bands may not get paid. And the last thing, which I think was the biggest kick in the teeth that I read, and this may be the hardest thing I think for a lot of bands, is I think that now they're looking at the bands to shoulder the burden of like insurance, I think, when they're on tour in these venues. And I don't really know exactly how that works. I've got a buddy who's a tour manager for a bunch of really big bands over the years. I should reach out to because I don't really understand that. But all of these things together make me think that when things couldn't be worse, someone like Live Nation can say, screw it, no, it could be worse. And this is how it's going to be in 2021. Yeah.
Basically, they just sort of passed every responsibility and liability to the artists to try and cover their own asses. I mean, they have also, they've had to lose huge chunks of their staff as well. It's affecting them too, so I can kind of see why they try to put some things in place. But everything they put in place was outrageous.
Well, I think last year, if I remember their last earnings call, I think it was like a $13 billion $13 billion company, I think. So anyway, I guess my point is, and look, I'm not the guy. My opinion doesn't mean shit. But at the end of the day, when I see all of this stuff going sideways, and then basically the puppet master says, by the way, when you do come back to work, you're going to make less. You're going to take on more responsibility and burden and risk. It's unconscionable. So anyway, I don't want to be a downer. I want your perspective, and I was just curious if that's going to change.
Well, I think we might try and look at try and find sort of more independent places that we can play. I think I'm hoping that, it might be a case of playing more places that are smaller, if there are many left. Hopefully there might even be people that once things are sort of gotten a little bit better, there's a good chance there's going to be a lot of empty sort of properties and venues that people might be sort of looking to sort of take up and get going again. I don't know. It really is just kind of, we're going to have to wait and see and cross that bridge when the time comes, I think.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, man, you've got a better attitude about all this, I think, than I would. I don't know.
I'm trying to retain that one, but yeah. But it's just unknown territory at the moment, isn't it? But,
no one's ever dealt with it. So hey, we'll leave the business heavy stuff behind, and we'll get into more of the fun stuff. I just wanted to ask you because I figured you have a good perspective there. So let's sort of go to the beginning. I want to know, Andy Selway, beast of a drummer, where'd you come from? Like, how did it influence you? I know that you're from England, and when I think of place, or places, geography, I think of how a lot of times it can affect a person or their art or their music. So I think, like, great case in point, I think of Priest, and I think of Sabbath, and, you know, from Birmingham, right? And, you know, lower middle class, working class, you know, city, industrial, sort of, you know, dark, gloomy future, like not a lot of prospects, you know, and to me, like, that's what sort of probably was heavily infused in their music, right? So I think place has a lot to do with who you end up being, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can hear the sort of industrial kind of vibes and the struggle in Sabbath, for instance. I mean, you can tell, you know, that's where they come from almost. But then again, ELO came from there as well. So,
yeah, I think of Evil Woman, or like.
You got Mr. Blue Sky on the other hand, especially. You know.
Yeah. So maybe I don't know. Maybe my theory doesn't hold water, but I think it does. I think ELO is the outlier. So tell us, whereabouts were you from in England? Like, what were your roots like? How did it, you know, sort of make you the dude that we see today?
I was born in Reading, which is just outside London. We moved around a bit as a family, but I grew up in a little village on the east coast of England, and my dad was a drummer.
Oh, cool.
That's how I started drumming. So I think he was over in the States working, doing something when I was around 3 years old, and he bought me back a drum kit when I was 3. So I've had a kit since I was 3 years old. I remember it vividly. Didn't even try to play it. I don't think it even had a bass drum pedal. I literally used to kick the kick drum. And I remember the drum heads, you know, they actually still had like fur on them. It was sort of calf skin, animal skins. And I just used to sort of beat around on that, but I was always into music. My mum was always playing music, which which could be anything from ABBA or whatever the hits of the day were, but she'd also be blaring out Deep Purple and, you know, stuff like that. I think my mum bought me my first Sabbath album when I was like 9 or 10.
That is good parenting. That's like we were talking before the show here, how, you know, we've both got kids, and, you know, music's a big part of that. And good parenting is taking your kid to Maiden. Good parenting is buying your kid a Sabbath album. You know, that is good parenting.
Yeah, no, my 3-year-old is sitting in the back of the car in his seat there, and he knows when Black Sabbath comes on. He knows when Ozzy Osbourne's singing. He's already getting it.
It's funny. That's like I took my kid to go see Ghost, and you know, he was like the only 8-year-old at the Ghost concert, as you can imagine, right? So it's key. I mean, like, to us, we don't hold back any music from him. Like, I don't know, maybe it's not good parenting, but for us, it's the right parenting. Like, so we don't hold back any music. If it's art, like, there, you know, we let them explore it. And you know, it's just great when little kids could dig the same thing that we like, and little kids wouldn't normally be into that.
Yeah, no, my boy, he's like, he hears all the music his mother plays, hears all the stuff that I play as well, and he's right across the board.
Wow.
You know, it amazes me what he's sort of wandering around singing sometime. I was playing a band called the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
No.
But it's a very British thing, fronted by a guy called Vivian Stanshall back in the 70s. And it's just complete nonsense.
Yeah.
And I had that on my iPod, and it came on, and he's like, put that one on again, put that one on again. And then you don't know what it's going to be.
Write that down. You have to send me that after the show.
I'll send you some links. It's interesting stuff. Yeah.
That's awesome. So that first kit you got, do you remember what brand it was, or?
I don't remember a brand, or it was like a white mother of pearl kind of finish. I don't know if it was a name brand or something, but I remember it being like an actual kit. It wasn't like one of these little toy kits. It was kids sizes, but it was real drums. And that floated around until I used to beat on it until I was about 10. And my dad, he wasn't playing so much anymore. He used to go out and play sort of more before I was born and a bit afterwards, you know, a bit of extra income and stuff.
Yeah.
And then, so his full-size kit was up in the attic. And I think I was about 10 years old. And he used to sort of teach me bits and pieces from the books and stuff. And I had a neighbour that played in a Scottish marching band. He played bagpipes. So he dragged me down to, to join in with the drummers there. And they're all sitting around doing the rudiments and stuff, which kind of bored the crap out of me. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I want to play on a big drum kit.
Oh, we'll get into the whole lesson thing later on, because I've got my view on that too. But I was sort of the same way. Like I just, as a kid, my rudiments were, it was like watching Peter Criss videos and stuff. I mean, I don't know, like that's how I was taught.
I mean, you want to be able to do it then and now. That's kind of, when you're a kid. I mean, it's like, someone telling you that practicing your bouncing your left and your rights and stuff is going to make everything better at the end of the day. It doesn't register. Big, shiny, noisy drums like the guy I saw on TV.
What kind of music was your dad playing?
He was, because they were just sort of going out playing 60s. He was mainly covers and stuff, just kind of all the hits of the day or whatever.
Yeah.
60s into the 70s. He's into all sorts of stuff as well. And I think he pretty much taught himself to play from books and used to lathe his own drumsticks, I think, as well.
Wow.
But he had his old Premier kit, which was up in the attic. And I think I was probably about 10 years old when he dug that one down and we sold the small kit. And I started playing on his bigger kit.
Yeah. You still have that Premier kit?
No, I wish. It's probably worth a fortune now as well. But
that'd be amazing.
No, that went, unfortunately. I think he kindly traded it in, and then with contributions from my newspaper round, traded in and got my own first proper kit, which we actually brought new, which was a Pearl Max wheel.
That's nicer than my first kit. Mine was by it was a Japanese company they called Araya. I think they made like guitars and drums. It was a piece of
I think they used to make basses. I think my brother had an Araya bass.
Yeah. I mean, it was like the coolest kit in the world to me. I mean, it really wasn't. It sounded awful, but it's a cool kit. So it's interesting. It's funny because it's funny how parents really sort of shape whether or not we get into music. Because my mom, she was from East Germany, and she escaped when she was very young, and traveled through the European countries and America. But I remember as a kid always listening to like German music, and like she would play her concertina, which is like an accordion, and she'd play her harmonica, right? And I'll never forget the first day that I brought home the album Fast as a Shark by Accept. Yeah. So I put that first track on, Fast as a Shark. She hears the high D, high do, high da, the German thing, and she looked at me like it was the greatest thing ever. So she was always a really great supporter of music, even though German music wasn't my thing. I think that's what sort of set me in my path. So it seems like the parents have a lot to do with it. If they love music and it's always on in the home, like the kid's just gonna absorb that.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, my dad played an instrument. My mother never played an instrument, but she was always playing records. So music was always there. It was always around, and and of course having the drum kit from an early age, even though I was just sort of beating on it. I mean, it obviously made an impression. And
it's funny. The other thing I'm just thinking way back. The one thing that really stuck with me is I remember as a kid, I was maybe 7 or 8. We were probably living in New York still. I think my dad took us to like a baseball field, like a Little League baseball field or something, where there was a concert and Tito Puente was playing. I don't know if you ever remember him, but he's like a mambo percussionist guy from, back in the day. Like, and when I saw that guy play, I just like, it blew my mind that someone could be that talented. So I think, it's interesting. Parents are everything. That's why we try to make sure that the kids are always so into music, because without that, like they wouldn't be our kids. Like it'd have to be someone else's kids.
Yeah, I think music's just so important on so many levels. It's just, with my boy, he's got a little drum kit in there already. He hasn't got that much interest in it yet. He comes around because he likes to come and hit the bigger drum kit in here.
That's what happens here.
Yeah.
My son's kit is right here. He likes this one.
Yeah, that's exactly the same thing going on. We've started to put it onto, because I don't want to sort of force him. I think he probably will gravitate towards it anyway.
Yeah.
But he, you know, he used to come in, wander in here in his diaper when he was really little, and he'd just pick up sticks and start hitting around. Of course, everybody bought him little toy drums as well because his dad was a drummer, and so I think he'll probably head towards that direction.
Yeah,
but
that's awesome. So who were your influences other than probably your dad, right? Like, but who are some of the drummers you heard, or even non-drummers, right?
Well, I always remember just seeing, as you know, as well as having this drum kit, and my mother always playing music, and you know, my dad sort of teaching me to start with bits and pieces. Just watching there was a music show in England called Top of the Pops, which is on once a week, does the chart rundown. And I remember sort of going back to, I must have been sort of 3, 4, I guess. So I remember like David Bowie with the Aladdin Sane makeup on, which used to terrify me. He scared the hell out of me at the time, just with the makeup. But I remember like T-Rex and Sweet and all those other kind of cool glam rock bands used to see on this show. And I just remember thinking, how cool is that? I want to do that.
Totally different league.
It's gone in subliminally, you know, at a very, very young age. And but
that's awesome.
You realize that it's an option at that point.
Yeah. Did you know that someday you're like, that's gonna be my job? I mean,
you know, not many years after that, it was like, in my mind, there was no other option. That was what I was going to do.
So here's a question that I know that I don't think we ever chatted about before. Have you ever had like a normal job? Like, what was your most normal job?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's, you know, being a professional musician as such, I mean, it's a load of dead-end jobs in between gigs. So, there's been all sorts of jobs to keep me afloat in between.
Like, have you ever been an accountant or like?
No. I just, because I decided, well,
accountant, I don't know, something.
Before any schooling had taken place, I decided that I was a drummer. So school went out the window as far as I was concerned. I just had to get through school so I could get out and join bands.
Yeah, you're focused.
Which is what I did, yeah. So there was no sort of exam results to speak of or training for any sort of work. I went straight into delivering documents around the local docks where I grew up.
Okay.
Dropping off paperwork to lorry drivers on a moped. From there, I moved to London to sort of get serious about bands and stuff, and I worked as a motorcycle courier in London. And in between then, I've done everything from deliver antiques to polish furniture to delivering hay for horses. I've done all sorts of stuff. You know, whatever it takes to sort of keep your roof over your head until you've got your next drumming gig, or you know, to get the band off the ground or whatever it was you were working on.
That is a varied resume.
Yeah. There's been all sorts of stuff, weird stuff over the years. I can't remember half of it, thankfully.
No. I'm always curious because like people who are in music and that's their gig, like they had to do something else at some point. So I'm always curious, like you know, were any of them something odd, like an accountant or you know, I don't know, like just normal stuff.
Most professional musicians I know, it's rare that you find many people now that their only source of income is music alone. There's usually always something else that they're sort of juggling with, whether it's a business they have sort of working from home or a day job that they have, you know, sort of flexible arrangements with where they can take time out for tours and stuff like that.
Sure.
But generally always something else on the go. I mean, there's only this kind of top thin layer of extremely wealthy types that sort of get to rest on their laurels.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
So what kinds of music or what genres of music like do you love to play the most? And it may not even be like what people would think it would be. And what genres do you just suck at? Because I think we all have something that we just don't like. Yeah.
No, I mean, I grew up definitely sort of, I listened to all sorts of music right across the board. I mean, I grew up on the kind of rock stuff, but like I say, my mum used to play a lot of ABBA. And that went in. I'm a massive ABBA fan. I always loved it. They just write classic, timeless songs.
Yeah.
I used to like the drumming on the ABBA records as well. But so I was right across the board. But mainly, I guess I was sort of focused on rock guys, and I sort of MAIDEN records, Sabbath records, Thin Lizzy records, Quadrophenia by the Who, that's the stuff I would put on my headphones and lock myself in the room and hammer away to those records. But I'm happy playing anything. I spent so many years playing rock and metal and punk now that I relish playing anything that's not that.
There you go.
Jazz is I have not got the subtlety or the skills.
For me, it's
no, I can't. I get nothing from it, and I can't do it.
Yeah, I would love to be able to do it. And like in my teens, in high school, I took a whack at it for a couple years, but I gotta tell you, I'm not soft enough. I'm not like, it's like you said, subtle enough. I don't know. I just, it's a different beast, man. It is a completely different animal.
Yeah. I mean, you really need to know your chops to sort of pull that stuff off properly. And I skipped a lot of the schooling that I would have needed in the early years to sort of be able to pull that off. But the main reason was it just didn't do anything for me. It's just, I like jazzy elements in other music, but I can admire a jazz drummer sitting there and doing his thing, of course. I mean, it's mind blowing what some of those guys get up to.
Oh, yeah.
But, when I was younger, I just used to sit up here, a ride cymbal going ding, 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 snare sort of accent and a kick every now and then. I'm like, where's the rest of it? Like, I don't want to hear a ride cymbal for half an hour.
That's the best thing about jazz is you could kind of just, do like out of place, weird snare hits and the random, kick drum hit. And you're like, dude, that's how it's meant to be.
Yeah.
Did you ever take lessons? Like, I never took lessons. Not like I was opposed to. I just never really took lessons. And like I said, looking at watching or listening to Kiss records and Sabbath, like that, those are my lessons. I don't know, right or wrong.
Same here. I mean, my dad, he got me going, so he got me up and running and sort of, got some basic beats going and stuff. And he had a book with all your double stroke rolls and stuff like that. And he would have me on a practice pad trying to sort of, which I would resist most of the time, but he was trying his hardest to teach me all of that stuff. And I picked up a fair bit of that. And then consequently forgot a lot of it because it just didn't get me where I needed to go quick enough.
Yeah.
So he kind of got me going lessons wise. I think I went for 1 or 2 lessons with a local drum teacher when I was maybe 13, 14.
Yeah.
And he was kind of like, well, you seem to be doing okay anyway. So what do you need me for? And I'm like, all right, thank you. But
well, it's funny because like you and I are members of a bunch of different online drum groups. That's sort of how we got to know each other. And when I hear other drummers getting really technical and deep on theory and like the rudiments, like that's when I realized, like, I've been playing for like 43 years. And, and I don't really know any of that. I just do what I do. And I realize that there's a difference between people who are trained at what they do and people who just learned it on their own. And I don't think one is better than the other. I like the fact that guys like us maybe learned it on our own and how to pick it up along the way, and you develop your own style and maybe not someone else's style. But but it's just funny because when I see those conversations, I'm like a fish out of water. I'm like, I'm not the guy to be in this conversation.
Yeah, no, once it gets sort of drum talk gets technical and, really gets into the art of drumming, I'm lost. I don't know what's going on there.
At the end of the day, like I always say, I hit shit, man. I just hit things.
Yes,
it sounds good. I just make sure it sounds good when I hit them. That's all I do.
Yeah. I mean, I always got the vibe, like you mentioned style. I mean, that was the one thing. I mean, I have admiration for the guys that have the technical skills and have been taught properly, got correct technique and everything, and it's amazing what they can do. And I'm half watching that stuff kind of thinking, I wish I'd applied myself more.
Yeah. Oh.
I probably wouldn't have ended up on the path I was on. I only ended up doing this because I actually went out and did it. And most guys I know that were really, really good in terms of, the technical side of things, they're still very technical, but they're still playing in the bedroom.
Yeah, well, that's the difference, right? Is like you either, jump off the cliff and make it happen, or you just get really good at being super technical and maybe it never happens for you, right?
I mean, I just used to throw myself into situations. So where I grew up in this little village, there were no rehearsal facilities. I mean, the nearest town was sort of 15 miles away. Well, there's one about 5 miles away, but there wasn't much in the way of rehearsal studios or anything there. Nearest bigger town where there was a couple of rehearsal studios was too far out of the way for most people where we lived.
Yeah.
So there was all the sort of local community halls, village halls and church halls and stuff out in the countryside. There was one down the bottom of my road, and that's where all the rock bands used to go and rehearse. And I could hear them just up the end of the street in our house. And I used to wander down. I used to peek through the windows and watch these guys practice. And they used to see me peeking through the window. Eventually, they're like, come in and have a look. Sit over there and watch. So I did. And then eventually it was like, do you want to have a go on the drums? And it's like, oh, I could play. I ended up being in bands with these guys. And I kind of learned all my stuff watching these dudes who were a few years older than me at the time. And that was it. So I just ended up I was a very young guy and ended up in bands with these other guys. And I guess I sort of reached the top of the tree in the area we grew up in. The only thing you could do from there was you had to go to London if it's going to go any further and you're going to take it seriously. And kind of when it came to that, it was only me that went. Just, it was sort of on my own. So I answered an advert in the back of a music magazine.
Yeah.
Got a friend to give me a ride up there. I thought, if I get this audition, I'll move up there. And I got the audition. And I'm like, oh, God, I've got to do it. And that was it. I moved, went home to my parents and said, oh, I'm moving to London next week, by the way. And that was it.
I can't even imagine. So when would that have been? Would that have been like the 80s or 90s? Like
it was 88. I think it was 18.
So like here in America, we have lots of great bands growing up, but I was always so jealous of like the bands that were coming out of England, right? Like just all my favorite bands, all of them were always English, right? Or German. Like I couldn't even imagine in the 80s because what the scene could have even been like there, the kinds of bands that must have been touring around the country. Because I mean, it's not that big of a country.
No, you kind of tour for 2 weeks and you've run out of country.
So, yeah, but the bands, like all my favorites, must have been sort of circling around and going to other countries and just.
There's a massive circuit in mainland Europe. Well, obviously going back to the sort of. With the Star Club in Hamburg and all the stuff the Beatles used to do, the residencies. A lot of bands early on sort of did that, I guess. But Europe was the sort of main gigging circuit for UK bands as well, I guess.
I can't imagine what that scene must have been like. So you've already let's get into sort of the embarrassing one of the embarrassing questions. I asked my last guest this too. His wasn't embarrassing enough, but it was pretty embarrassing. So. Like everyone's got like that musical guilty pleasure. Now, look, you already said you like ABBA. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Are there any other bands that or performers that people may just be surprised that you really like? Where you put the song on and you just love it and you don't care who knows it.
Yeah, probably. I don't consider it guilty or embarrassing, but I'm a massive Supertramp fan.
Oh yeah.
Love Supertramp.
That's not very embarrassing though.
That's just good,
amazing,
good music. Let me think. ABBA we've done. I mean, Katy Perry. I like all sorts of cheesy pop stuff.
Hey, it's funny. We were talking about that last week. How even though like I'm a rock guy through and through, like I did a cover of a Bruno Mars song, and I couldn't shake how much fun it was. Like
he's a talented guy. He's a great drummer as well. If you've seen him play,
yeah, he's incredible.
Yeah.
So like pop, you're right though. Pop, man, there's a reason it's popular, right? Even though it may not be fashionable for a rock guy to say that he loves Katy Perry. The reality is those songs are just like.
Well, I think that's it. Because they focus on the song. I mean, that is the purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it. You've got to get 3-minute earworm into as many people's heads as possible.
Yeah. It's funny because
whatever package it's in, but
oh yeah. Well, I say when I think of like pop in the rock context, I think that's why I love punk bands like the Descendants and All and like Bad Religion, because like these guys, like even if they weren't punk, like they would be crazy good pop songwriters because like their songwriting is so hooky, so catchy. like in and out in a couple minutes. Like, so it's funny, like those pop elements in a punk band, again, like Descendants or All or you know.
So that's where I get weird, because I didn't know those bands sort of growing up as such, because I kind of knew English punk bands.
Well, they're totally different, right? I mean,
yeah,
we're talking about like California, Southern California punk, and New York.
Well, then it
punk.
would come to the sort of pop punk, the sort of stuff over the more American punk.
Totally different, yeah. A bit more like a surfy sort of.
Well, it just didn't make sense to me, because I don't know, I think I preferred my pop more poppy and my punk more punky. So when it mixed it up like that, it didn't quite work for me.
Well, it's like,
no, I mean, there's always exceptions. I mean, at the end of the day, if it's good, it's good. Was my own.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Well, I mean, like the Pistols. I mean, the first time I heard the Pistols, it was just like unlike anything I'd ever heard before, and it was so great because it felt like it could implode at any second. Like that, the song may not even finish. Like someone might die, or so, you know, like it was so explosive sounding and raw.
It's just really, really well written. 3-minute pop. They're pop songs on their own, I guess, to a degree.
Yeah.
Just played in a sort of rock and roll, rough rock and roll punk kind of style, but
incredible. Yeah. It's incredible. So, hey, can you tell us a bit? I mean, I think everyone that's watching will probably see the promo trailer, as well as know that you're in KMFDM, and like they've been around forever. You've probably been with them 15, 20 years, as far as I understand it.
Yeah, nearly 20. Yeah, 18, 19 years.
Yeah. So, who are some of the groups you've been with? I know there's some others that I'm not as familiar with. Maybe you can tell us some of the bands you've been with.
There's been so many over the years. I mean, there was all the bands I was in back in England. There was one called Big Boy Tomato, or Tomato, as you would say. I guess.
Big Boy Tomato?
Yeah. That was kind of poppy punk stuff as well, with female-fronted poppy punk stuff with great songs. And we used to go out and we did some touring with the Toy Dolls. We were another great band. The Toy Dolls.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah, we toured with them. Did a big European tour with them. We used to open up for Stiff Little Fingers.
No way.
I'm trying to think now. And we kind of opened up for everybody at one point. UK subs we played with quite a bit.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and it was sort of doing well. We used to go and tour across Europe a lot, and then that kind of broke up. And then I fell into this sort of, I was doing bits of session stuff over there as well every now and then. Just sort of, I'd end up in studios recording with Big Boy Tomato or whatever band I was in at the time. And every now and then I'd get a phone call. We just had a guy in and a band in, and the drummer kind of sucked. Could you come and redo the drums once he's gone? Oh, okay.
I hear those stories all the time where, you hear this from lots of different bands where like someone will be on tour with somebody and like a band will open for them and they'll remember this dude like 5 years later and they'll ring him up and say, hey, we've got an opening. We'd love for you to be in the band. Like it seems like that stuff happens more than you might think.
It's just being out there. It's just being, and if you're not out there sort of playing and making yourself visible, then, no one's going to call you. But if someone's seen you and is impressed and my name's I've always ended up with the gigs I've gotten, not through seeking them. They've just kind of come through being out there.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're half decent at what you're doing out there, then people are going to sort of remember. I mean, like if people need a guitarist or a bass player, I've got this kind of Rolodex in my head that will instantly open up with people I've known over the years that I could recommend. And I guess it's the same for people looking for drummers. So
yeah. So Big Boy Tomato, Big Boy Tomato, however you want to say it. Obviously KMFDM. What about you were in the Dwarves for a bit, is that right? Or
Dwarves was yeah. So KMFDM happened exactly as you just said. I was playing after Big Boy Tomato. Did a couple of other bands. I ended up meeting a guy called Steve, who was the guitarist in Pig and then KMFDM as well. Oh, right. In a pub in England while I was playing in some band I can't even remember the name of. It was sort of between gigs kind of band.
Yeah.
And there was sort of like terrible indie stuff, and I have to sort of play completely against how I'd normally play. But he heard me sound check, so he heard me sort of let loose and do what I would normally do. And he's like, we're going to Japan with this band Pig. Do you want to come and audition? I'm like, yeah. And I didn't hear from him for about 6 months. I sort of took it all with a grain of salt. And then got another phone call saying, yeah, so the Japan thing's happening. You want to come down and try out? Yeah, sure. He said, you played to a click track before? I said, yeah, of course I have. I've never had. But obviously I managed to bullshit my way through it because I got that gig. And, you know, a month or so later, we're in Japan playing some pretty big shows.
To a click track.
To a click track, yeah.
You learned in those couple months or whatever.
Everything I've done has always been like, me, I'll do it.
Yeah.
And then you have to pull it out yourself.
Yeah.
You don't know if you can do it or not until you're in the situation. So I just kind of throw myself into it. And then you just have to come through. If you don't, you're going to look pretty stupid. That happened a few times as well. That definitely happened a few times. But yeah, that led to me joining Pig. And Raymond from Pig was in KMFDM.
Oh,
and Steve,
gotcha.
There was the whole connection. So in 1997, Pig opened up on a US tour for KMFDM, which is how I first got to know those guys. They split, and whatever happened. When Sasha was putting the thing back together, he obviously remembered us guys from the tour. It was like 5-6 years previous. And then we got a phone call. You know, would you like to do some stuff?
That easy.
Just kind of, it's just being out there, I guess. Yeah.
It's true. It's all of, you're right. It's all about being visible, constantly putting yourself out there, saying that you'll do things, and then figuring out how to do it on the fly. Like,
and through that, Sasha gave us the opportunity to move to the States. So much the same as I'd sort of split decision in, you know, over the course of a day or two to move to London when I was 18.
Yeah.
The same thing with moving to the States. It's like, look, here's an opportunity. So I went to my parents again, said, oh, by the way, I'm moving to America this time. When? It was like next week. Oh,
next week.
And I've been here nearly 20 years now. So.
It's amazing. So when you were playing with Dwarves, let me tell you, I saw a clip on YouTube. I don't know where it was. I don't know where the clip was filmed. I think it was like a European tour or something. It said.
No, the one. Well, the one I think you saw the other day with the naked guy. That was at Riot Fest, which is up in the woods. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
that was the last show I did with them, actually, about 5-6 years ago.
Well, yeah. Okay. So first of all, it was an amazing performance. The thing that sort of sidetracked me, though, I wanted to see how you were playing, but it's hard. It's hard to watch what you're playing when the bass player literally is like totally naked, not like like totally naked.
Yeah.
The whole song, he's right in front of you. You're staring at his ass because he's like right in front of you. Like, you had the worst seat in the house. Like, is that like an every night thing?
It was. So there's he who came up be named. He's the naked guitarist that's been kind of co-founded the Dwarves. And the other naked guy you saw in the video you're referring to, I think, was Nick Oliveri, formerly of Queens of the Stone Age.
Yeah.
And he goes way back with the Dwarves. He's been their bass player on and off many times. But yeah, so a couple of points of my sort of tenure in the band, I've had two naked asses to stare at throughout the whole show.
like the whole show. The whole show.
Well, having said that, the whole show with the Dwarves is probably about 20 minutes.
But still, it's one thing when Ozzy comes out, he drops his pants, he pulls them up. It's another thing. Thing for one or two guys in the band to be completely naked the entire show. I salute you for being able to carry out your work and not get distracted by that.
That last show I did with them, the Riot Fest show, actually, we'd just come off the back of a KMFDM tour. And I'd been home for about a week or two, and my arm had sort of swollen up here like Popeye. This doesn't look right. I just thought it was tendonitis or something, which happens after you've been drumming every night on tour. And after a few weeks, I'm like, this doesn't feel right at all. So I went. Actually, I didn't find this out till afterwards, but it was hurting. Then I went out and did the Dwarf shows, and I remember that Riot Fest show that we did. I had to pop a pain pill and drink a couple of beers before the show, which I don't normally do.
Yeah.
Because it just makes it hard work drumming when you're trashed. But I had to do it to get through that one. And it was a week or two after that, I found out that I just probably played the last 3 weeks worth of shows with a completely severed tendon.
Wow.
I'd managed to rip the tendon in my forearm completely in half. And that took some rather painful surgery and about a year of recovery before I was able to drum again.
That is unbelievable. It's funny when I was looking up some of the history, because I think I knew Dwarves because I think they were a Chicago band originally.
Yeah.
So I knew them, like I knew of them. I didn't know a lot of the history, and I was looking at the members of the band, and like their list of names is like the things that dreams are made of. So what were some of your names, and what were some of the other names in the band?
So my first one, when I first joined the band, it was an overnight deal. On my first KMFDM tour, I think, as a member of KMFDM, we had a band opening up for us. There was a guitarist called Clint. He was playing in that band. He also played with the Dwarves, who I had heard of. I did know about the Dwarves. So this is 2003. I've just moved to the States, and I just got a call out of the blue saying, well, our drummer's just kind of lost the plot. Would you like to try out and, come out and play some shows with the Dwarves? So I said, yeah. He's like, when? He's like, tomorrow. Oh, what? And the singer was in town because they were about to start doing these shows. And he literally came round and he took me up to a record store. He bought a bunch of their albums used, listened to them, went down to our rehearsal room. Me and Jules had a little rehearsal room in Seattle at the time. He had me jam along to a few of the songs, and that was it. And I had to learn the other 23 songs in the car on the way to Portland to play my first show. And I'm just like, got a book full of notes. I'm trying to turn over between songs. But all the Dwarf songs are like 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So, I mean, trying to get sort of 24 in as many hours to learn them was a bit of a difficult one. But yeah, I ended up sort of doing them on and off in 2003 up until about 4 or 5 years ago.
That's amazing. Yeah, I got it. You got to tell the viewers though, like your names, because
sorry, yeah. So that led
to names. That when I was reading the names, I couldn't even get through them.
So Blag decided as I'm foreign, it might as well be Dutch Ovens was my given Dwarves name. Which he's Dutch Ovens. He's like, well, if you're foreign, Dutch. What goes with Dutch? Ovens. There you go. That's your name. And there was an incident involving hangovers and a lack of a toilet on the drive after we played Atlantic City one time, which required an emergency stop and me running off into the woods. And that's when I became Sharticus.
Sharticus?
Which rapidly changed into Forest Chitica.
Oh, so anyone watching this, go out to Wikipedia and look up Dwarves and just look at the laundry list of names that they had in that band, and it'll make you think fondly of this time that you spent with Andy.
It was one of the previous drummers was called Gnarly Watts, is one of my favorite ones.
Well, hey man, I appreciate being so candid on these names. These are awesome, man. I'm glad we got a chance to touch on some of the Dwarf stuff. Amazing. So, it's funny because like I think initially we started chatting a long time ago because I have a sort of a weird electric setup, and you were sort of dabbling between acoustic drums and electronic drums. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of like what you use in the studio? Like, are you still using e-drums as well as acoustics, or like, what's your setup today? I don't know that I even know anymore.
Well, because of it's kind of whatever works for whatever we're doing because of the nature of the stuff. I mean, a lot of the stuff on the KMFDM records is programmed. 80% of it, a lot of the time. Yeah. And then we learn it as a sort of band on our sort of instruments and before a tour, and we head out and do it on the road. That's usually, we've usually made the record first. Yeah. Then we'll all go and learn how to play it together in a room in the course of a week or 10 days, and then we tour, which is backwards to every other band I was in before that. But with KMFDM, I mean, I came along sort of slowly on the recording side. Sasha and Jules and the other guys in the band at the time, right? They all knew the sort of recording, how to use Pro Tools and all that sort of stuff, which I hadn't done. So I kind of learned slowly through watching them. That piqued my interest in that, which kind of led to me getting more interested in drum recording. So I'd sort of slowly contribute a few bits to KMFDM stuff. But that was me kind of programming drums, and you know, I just sort of learned on the fly with that as well. And for the most part, I'd be programming stuff, and then I'd have to work out what I was going to play live on the acoustic kit after the fact. But that led me to experiment with the, you know, trying to get decent drum sounds. I want to get more, sort of more live drums on some of the KMFDM records.
Yeah.
Which sometimes works and sometimes doesn't, because we need it to sound bigger than real drums do a lot of the time.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And I can only get, you know, a certain size drum sound in a room this big.
Yeah.
That's what led to me sort of dabbling with the electronic stuff more, because you've got all the superior Drummer 3 software and stuff like that now. I mean, the samples are so good, the quality.
It's amazing.
That's what took me down that path. And I was toying with the idea of using it live as well for a while. Partly because, you know, we're all getting older and my ears are getting shot. It would make
permanent ringing in my ears.
I've lost a few frequencies in both ears as well. It's definitely a bit of a dip in the mid range and the high end, but it was kind of just a sort of experimenting with it to see how it'd work out, you know, recording on an E-kit for stuff, which I did on a lot of the KMFDM records. The only reason I kind of backed off from it a bit, I still use it. It's just the hi-hats was the main Achilles heel.
Yeah, we've talked about that before, right? Yeah. Like that was always the point that was sort of was like the pain in the ass for you, is you always said that like you couldn't get the hats sort of responsive, right, the way you
were just never convincing enough. And sure, you could sort of fix them after the fact and sort of manipulating the MIDI and stuff.
Yeah.
But I just, at least everything I tried, you know, I only had access to like my TD12 and, you know, VH11s, is it? The hi-hats I had, I had other ones as well, but I just, you get close sometimes, but you never quite get the nuances and the bits and pieces I need, or the reliability that I would get with a real hat. So then I was using the electronic kit, or the converted electronic kit, with real cymbals and hats. But then it's kind of like you're defeating the purpose of using the E-kit. So
you know, it's funny because I had VH12 hats for a long time with my Pro Mimic Pro, and never had an issue with it. You know, it worked fine.
I'm seeing your videos; they seem to behave pretty well. You seem to have them under control.
Yeah, they do. Now I've switched over to field percussion, metal hats and ride, and probably doing the whole set here soon. And I do find that just like, you know, like the articulation, like the feeling of it is dramatically different, right? Because rubber, you're sinking into it, and that's not how a cymbal feels, right? So I am enjoying that a lot more now, just that not sinking into the cymbal as much, having sort of that stick definition. In my videos, I don't know, to me the hats sound fine. I don't have the critical ear that you would, you know, or someone who's necessarily, you know, in the business and done recording. But to me, the metal hats seem to work really well. But I get your point. We've talked about it before, and that's why you sort of never were happy with the you know, electronic hi-hats.
It was kind of reliability and stuff as well. It's just like, I mean, and frustration. So on a real hi-hat, you play it and it does exactly what you played on it. Yeah. Whereas that's not always the case on an electronic hi-hat. I mean, sometimes the transition from tightly closed to gradually opening up, leading into a chorus or something, isn't very gradual. You know, it will trigger the wrong samples, or it will just miss. You can never quite get them dialed in right where it's catching the sort of lighter hits, because I do quite a bit of intricate stuff on hi-hats sometimes, and it's just frustration. And I didn't have access to a Mimic Pro. I've heard a lot of people having good results with some higher end hi-hats, those ATV hi-hats.
Yeah.
Those ones, the ATV ones with a Mimic Pro, seem to be a good combination. I've heard people get good results with those. Yeah.
And I always found it interesting that you sort of did, you know, dabbled in both. And it's funny because the music with KMFDM is very, I don't say it's like very electronic, but it's, you know, it is. It's electronic with really heavy riff, you know, really heavy guitar riffs and stuff on it. It's interesting because like last night I was I was just, whenever I go to bed, I always listen to music. I can't just fall asleep. So I was listening to some KMFDM last night, and so it was a constant thing is the track I was listening to. And it's funny because you listen to the track from the album, and then you listen to the track from the live concert, like the live video that's on YouTube. And when you have the real deal like drums on top of it, man, to me, that's the sound I prefer, because you already have like these heavy, like really tight guitar riffs in that song, and then all of a sudden you hear your drumming on top of it, and to me that like sort of it's just a different take on what's recorded on that album, right? So it's interesting how they're different, but then live, like you bring this whole different element to it. So, and that's all on acoustics. That's what you're using now when you go on tour. It's just acoustics, yeah.
Yeah, I did one tour back in 2011 where we actually converted a kit and used triggered cymbals as well, at least for the first 2 weeks of the tour. But I was triggering addictive drums. We had one of my regular kits, and we padded it out with bits of foam and stuff, put mesh heads on it, some D drum triggers on it. And it seemed to sort of work okay for the kind of first week of the tour.
Yeah.
The cymbals again were the problem. It was the hats, crashes, ride, everything. It's just that was the problem. That was the letdown again. The shells, it actually worked okay for the most part. We didn't have any sort of major technical disasters triggering the actual drums. The biggest problem I had was I can't change how I've played my whole life, which is kind of like this. You do that on a mesh head, you got boing, and your arms back up here, and it was killing my limbs. It was I was getting aches and pains in places I've never hurt before.
Too much rebound.
Yeah, way too much. And so about 2 weeks into that tour, I just had to say to Sasha, look, I've got to. I would destroy the electronic cymbals I was using anyway. They were just smashed to pieces, as well as not triggering correctly anyway. So I had to go back to the acoustic cymbals, at which point the volume's back in town. And it's like, well, we might as well just dig out the rest of the drums. I mean, it's a drum kit. It doesn't go wrong.
Unless you break something, that's it.
It works. But then I've got, spare snare. That's in place in 2 seconds. Whereas if it stops triggering halfway through a show, is it the trigger? Is it the cable? Is it the module? Is it the software?
There's a lot of points of failure.
Yeah, I mean, if I had a sort of dedicated guy that knew this stuff inside out, that could watch every move I was making behind my drum kit, then maybe that could have worked. But it just kind of felt different as well. It's having always played on an acoustic kit and just been a sort of more live kit drummer. I'm happy to use E-drums in a studio when I want to. It just didn't feel right live.
Makes sense. I get it, man. That's the easiest explanation, right?
And plus, I don't think it gave it the same difference. Like you said, the difference between a KMFDM record and a KMFDM live show. If I was using an electronic kit, then we wouldn't be too far away from the record. It would probably sound a lot more like the record. So triggering sounds that we used on the record, whereas just an acoustic kit on top of whichever program drums we decide to leave in. Right.
Yeah. So if anyone ends up, seeing this interview and they didn't see the promo trailer for it that'll come out shortly before this video, check out like the last, minute or so of the promo video, because you'll see the song that we're talking about performed live for like I think a 30th anniversary tour or concert that your band did, and it'll give people a sense for like what that sounds like. It was just it's a freaking amazing clip.
Thank you.
So listen, I've taken a lot of your time. I really appreciate you wasting your time on a school night with a dude in his basement. Yeah, I appreciate you wasting the time with me. The last question, though, it's the most burning question. It's like a one-word answer: Maiden or Motorhead?
Oh, that's a horrible question.
There's no right answer.
No, there isn't. That really is a horrible question. I love both equally. I would have to say, for me, and there's some people going to want to kill me for this, but I would have to say slightly Maiden, more so, but mostly because Clive Burr, drumming along to Clive Burr is a big part of where I stole a lot of my early chops from and stuff. Him and Tommy Aldridge.
Oh, yeah.
Those were the guys that sort of, I remember as a kid sort of playing along to those records, and, you know, that taught me a lot more.
Yeah, well, look, my answer is MAIDEN. That being said, Motorhead's probably one of the greatest bands that's ever graced the earth.
I told you my mother bought me my first Sabbath album when I was 9 or 10. She also bought me my first Motorhead album that very same Christmas. I got them together.
It's funny, when my son was born, at the time I was connected with a bunch of people in the music business, and one of them was in a pretty big band, and he knew Lemmy, and it was interesting because when my son was born, we got a package in the mail with a Motorhead onesie and a sheet of like music note paper, and it was a note handwritten from Lemmy to my wife, and we kept it forever because, like, you know, it's just, he's an icon. The band is iconic.
Absolutely, yeah.
But for me, I'd still pick MAIDEN. So.
Yeah, I mean, Motorhead. I guess Motorhead kind of broke more barriers in some ways, and you know, it's different beast though. But yeah, that's such a tricky question.
I know. Well, hey, I appreciate the answer. And look, man, again, just we'll just wrap it up and say much thanks for you spending time here. You've always been, you know, a great guy when we've chatted outside of here, and you know, you got better things to do, but you know, you spent some time with us, and I appreciate it. And,
that's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we look forward to hopefully 2021 not being the kick in the nuts that 2020 was, and hopefully we'll see you and your band in cities near us. You know, we can only hope.
I hope so. Yeah, I'm itching to get out there again. I mean, I'm enjoying sort of building up the recording from home thing as well. I mean, one good thing about the recording from home as well is you get to play lots of varied styles, which is quite nice. And some people just ask me to program stuff, which I'm fine doing that as well. But yeah, I can't wait to get out and do some shows.
Well, great, man. So, hey, everyone, thanks. Thanks for joining Andy and myself. Andy, thanks for being here. You know, please feel free to share the video with friends that you know, so they can see some of the insight that Andy shared with us tonight. You know, we'll look forward to maybe this will be such a hit that we'll make it to an episode 3, and I won't get fired from whoever the director, producer person is here in the basement. Maybe I'll keep my job.
There you go.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe you'll be the ticket. I appreciate it, Andy. Thanks for joining us. And guys, stay safe out there. It's pretty crazy. It's still 2020. And it hasn't been great so far. So
keep your masks on.
Good night.
Yep. Thank you for having me. If you hear sounds that sounds like farts, it's this chair. Sorry. Every time I lean back in it, it makes this farting sound.